Greek bodies looked the way they did because of one thing modern fitness has completely abandoned. They let themselves be hungry. Not accidentally, not because food was scarce, but deliberately, as a tool, a practice, a philosophy built into every part of how they trained, healed, and thought. Walk into any gym today and you'll hear the same advice bouncing off every wall. Eat before you train or you'll lose muscle. Never skip breakfast or your metabolism crashes. Fuel every 3 hours or your body panics and clings to fat. The Greeks would have called this madness. Because those marble statues standing in museums right now, the shoulders, the definition, the proportions that modern bodybuilders still study and try to replicate, those weren't idealized fantasies. They were documentation. Real bodies, carved in stone because they represented something actually achievable. And those men built them hungry. Not despite it, because of it. So the question isn't whether fasting worked for them. We can see that it did. The real question is why, and why we completely forgot it. That's what this is about. To understand what the Greeks figured out, you first need to understand what happens inside your body when you eat constantly versus when you do not. When food arrives every 2 or 3 hours, insulin stays elevated. Elevated insulin does one very specific thing. It locks energy inside fat cells and prevents your body from ever learning to access it. Your metabolism becomes dependent, fragile. It can only function if external fuel keeps arriving on schedule. Miss a meal and your energy crashes, your focus drops, you feel irritable and weak. Modern fitness calls this normal. The Greeks would have recognized it as a training problem, because here is what they understood through direct observation, even without the language to explain the mechanism. A body that panics at the first sign of hunger is a body that has never been taught to function independently. And a body that cannot function independently will always have a ceiling on what it can achieve. When you train in a fasted state, the opposite happens. Insulin drops. Fat oxidation increases because the body has to pull from its own reserves rather than waiting for external supply. Growth hormone rises naturally. It is the same hormone the supplement industry charges a fortune to try to replicate artificially, and it does so specifically to preserve muscle while the body burns stored fat for fuel. Blood that would otherwise be diverted to your gut processing a pre-workout meal stays available for working muscles and a working brain. The result is what researchers now call metabolic flexibility, the ability to switch fuel sources smoothly depending on what is available, to burn fat when food is absent, and to store nutrients efficiently when food returns. Greek athletes had this. Modern bodies largely do not, because we have spent decades training our metabolisms to be dependent by never allowing hunger to last long enough to trigger adaptation. The Greeks treated the first signal of hunger as a sign the body was ready. We treat it as an emergency that must be silenced before anything productive can happen. That single difference in philosophy produces entirely different bodies over time. The performance advantage was only part of it, because the Greeks did not just use fasting to build better athletes, they used it to build healthier people. Hippocrates, working from careful observation rather than theory, noticed something that contradicted every instinct about how to care for the sick. When serious illness struck, appetite disappeared on its own, the body rejected food. And the physicians who worked with that response, rather than against it, consistently saw better outcomes than those who force-fed their patients back to strength. His conclusion was direct. Digestion is expensive, it requires significant energy, and it diverts resources away from everything else the body might need to do. If a body is already under serious stress trying to fight disease, forcing it to simultaneously process food does not help it recover faster. It splits its resources. He did not override the body's signal. He listened to it. What he was observing, without the tools to understand it at a cellular level, was a process that science now calls autophagy. When the body enters a fasted state, it initiates a cellular cleanup. Damaged components are broken down and recycled. Inflammatory markers decrease, and repair pathways activate that simply do not run when the body is busy processing a constant stream of incoming food. This mechanism was significant enough that when researchers finally mapped it in detail, it earned a Nobel Prize in 2016. Hippocrates did not know the word autophagy, but he knew the outcome. He built a medical philosophy around working with the body's natural fasting response rather than overriding it with well-meaning but counterproductive feeding. The broader principle he identified still holds. The body has repair mechanisms built in. They activate during rest and during fasting, and constantly feeding, even with good food, can interfere with those mechanisms running properly. Strength means nothing if the body is quietly breaking down underneath it. The Greeks understood this. They did not treat fasting as deprivation. They treated it as maintenance. In the same way, a machine needs to be shut down periodically to be serviced. The body needs periods without food to run its internal repair processes. Modern medicine is only now beginning to take this seriously. The Greeks built it into daily life 2,000 years ago. Here is where it gets interesting. The Greeks did not separate physical excellence from mental excellence. They saw them as the same project. A body built on discipline produced a mind capable of discipline, a mind that could control appetite, could control attention, emotion, and judgment. Conversely, a mind that surrendered to every impulse would eventually produce a body that reflected that surrender. This was not abstract philosophy. It was a practical training principle with a specific application. Pythagoras, known today almost exclusively as a mathematician, was also deeply interested in human performance. He fasted for extended periods before important intellectual work and documented what he noticed. Mental clarity increased. Complex problems became easier to hold in the mind. The usual fog that followed heavy meals simply did not appear. He was so convinced by the results that he eventually refused to teach advanced students until they had fasted themselves. Not as punishment, not as ritual, as preparation. If you could not demonstrate control over the most basic biological drive, you were not ready for the kind of sustained, precise thinking advanced work required. Modern neuroscience now offers an explanation for what he was experiencing. During fasting, the liver produces ketones as an alternative fuel source for the brain. These molecules cross the blood-brain barrier and appear to enhance certain aspects of cognitive function in ways that glucose alone does not replicate. Research also links fasting to increases in brain-derived neurotrophic factor, a protein that supports the formation of new neural connections and improves the brain's capacity to learn. In practical terms, your brain becomes more capable of complex, sustained thought during fasted states than it is immediately after eating. The Greeks did not have brain scans, but they had consistent, repeated observation across centuries of intellectual and athletic culture. And what they consistently observed was that hunger sharpened the mind rather than dulling it, provided the person had trained themselves to sit with the discomfort rather than immediately eliminating it. Plato made this explicit. He restricted access to his most advanced philosophical teachings to students who had demonstrated they could fast. The ability to override appetite was not just a health practice, it was evidence of a mind capable of overriding impulse more broadly. A mind that could override impulse could think clearly under pressure, reason carefully in difficulty, and maintain focus when distraction was available. This was the deeper purpose fasting served in Greek intellectual culture. It was not just to improve the brain chemically, but to train the mental quality that made everything else possible, the ability to stay present with discomfort without immediately running from it. Pull all of this together, and a single organizing principle emerges that ran through every part of Greek life. Rhythm over excess. Not starvation, not deprivation, not asceticism for its own sake. Rather, a deliberate alternation between periods of hunger and periods of nourishment, between periods of intense effort and periods of rest, between periods of engagement and periods of stillness. The body they built was not the result of constant accumulation, more food, more training, more supplementation. It was the result of a system that knew how to respond to both presence and absence, a metabolism that could access stored energy when food was not available and store nutrients efficiently when it was, a physique that reflected not just effort, but recovery, Not just input, but adaptation. This is almost the exact opposite of how modern fitness thinks about building a body. We treat more as better by default. More protein, more training volume, more supplementation to fill every possible gap. The fear of missing something, a meal, a nutrient, a training window, drives decisions more than any coherent philosophy of what the body actually needs to adapt and improve. The Greeks were not afraid of hunger. They used it, they scheduled it, they built their training, their intellectual work, and their medical practice around the understanding that the absence of food was not a threat to be managed, but a condition that unlocked capabilities the fed state could not access. What does that actually look like in practice? It looked like athletes training in the morning before eating. It looked like philosophers fasting before important work. It looked like physicians allowing sick patients to follow their body's natural loss of appetite, rather than forcing food that the system was not ready to process. It looked like a culture that had a fundamentally different relationship with hunger than the one we have inherited. We have built an entire industry around the fear of being hungry for more than an hour. Protein bars, pre-workout meals, post-workout shakes, meal timing protocols, all of it built on the assumption that hunger is an enemy to be defeated rather than a signal to be understood. Return to those statues one more time. When you look at them, the proportions, the muscle definition, the complete absence of excess, you are actually looking at the physical expression of a philosophy, not a diet, not a supplement stack, not a training program, a relationship with the body built on a completely different set of assumptions than the ones we have inherited. The assumption that hunger is information, not an emergency. That the body has capabilities in the fasted state that the fed state cannot access. That repair matters as much as performance. That the mind and body are one project, not two separate things to be optimized independently. And that restraint, practiced consistently, produces more than accumulation ever could. The Greeks did not achieve those bodies despite limited resources. They achieved them partly because of how they related to limitation itself. Hunger was not a problem to be solved. It was a teacher. One that demanded patience, rewarded discipline, and built over time a body and a mind that functioned as a single, efficient, resilient system. Modern fitness sold us the idea that the path to a better body runs through more food, more supplements, more optimization of every variable. The Greeks built the gold standard of human physique on less, and on the understanding that less used deliberately produces more than most people ever achieve through accumulation. That's the actual secret, not a supplement, not a protocol, a philosophy. And it has been sitting in plain sight, carved in marble, for 2,000 years.